Yo, Happy New Year, Happy Chinese New Year, Happy Lunar New Year for those who celebrate it. I want to talk about Lantern Rite. And I just started the quest on Chinese New Year actually, and then I finished it, I think, a couple days after. And I had a lot of fun with it, so I just want to go over my thoughts on it and pretty much just literally give whatever my thoughts on about it. So overall, I enjoyed the quest a lot. There were really good vibes. It was nice being back in it's the annual Lantern Rite. It's the whole festive New Year vibes that I was looking forward to in Genshin every year, and I think I got exactly just that. Just a little bit different because, unlike previous Lantern Rite events, the story here is more focused on outside the festival per se. It's more like a Hu Tao story quest Act 2, but it did have just general New Year themes that I liked a lot. So yeah, let's talk about the quest first because that was the main overarching thing here. And the plot here is more revolving around Hu Tao and her work as the director of the Wangshan Funeral Parlor, where there's been a crisis recently in Liya where a lot of people have been getting symptoms of death, quote unquote, from the ley lines, where they're pretty much nearing death, like most notably one of them being Xingqiu's great-grandfather. This is a similar incident to an event from 2 to 3,000 years ago during the Archon quest, where we had an ancient god of Liyue, Tao Do, who was a tree, had become affected by the war, and so, because of that, gave symptoms of these death-like illnesses to the people, spreading them out. And it took 8 humans that had adepto-like powers called adepts, the 8 adepts, to try and contain the problem. One of them had to sacrifice themselves, that person representing the lone butterfly of the Crimson Flame, which I wonder who that could be related to in the modern time. And it's come up again, and because Hu Tao is the director of the Wangshan Funeral Parlor, she is the one that's responsible for maintaining the boundary, this border between life and death, a continuation of her story quest Act 1. The plot here is pretty much like a sequel to Hu Tao's story quest Act 1, but it does 2 things better. It adds more personality to Hu Tao's character that I think should have been in Act 1, and it does continue things off, but relates them to our current characters today and just the overarching world of Teyvat. Oh, and side note, I think that because we have more new lore introduced about the Archon War, that's just like another good reason that for the anime to come sooner, and I hope that the anime covers things like the Archon War, because the material in the Archon War is great anime material. So anyways, the plots, I'm not going to recap the entire plot per se, I'm just going to try to give my summarized thoughts on it, but basically, Hu Tao's family from the past, so her dad and grandfather who had passed away, Hu Tao actually berates her dad because she thinks that because he had not been focused during his job, he lost his life, and so Hu Tao kind of berates him for that. And it talks poorly of him, which is a very interesting layer to Hu Tao's character that I didn't know that I wanted, actually. The writers weave this aspect of Hu Tao's family into her character, and it's a very interesting part because she inherits the position of director from her family, and she doesn't really want to repeat the mistakes that her family did, but then this makes her too busy with work because she's always so focused on it, which makes her so busy, too busy to hang out with friends and such, the whole overworked trope, per se. But this trope makes sense to me because it's a natural part of her character and her conflict, per se, with how she feels about her family. So I thought that the story exploring that aspect of Hu Tao's character was very interesting. Anyways, kind of like the whole 8 adepts that we talked about earlier, one of the plot points is that to contain the border between life and death, Hu Tao has to sacrifice herself, much like the butterfly adept from the past. This is very similar to what we just played with Natlan's Archon quest, where Mavuika, to save Natlan, she feels that she has to sacrifice herself. And I will say that, okay, I've talked about my criticisms of Natlan's Archon quest, and we got a similar quest here during this Lantern Rite event. I liked how the story went about the whole sacrificing part in this quest more so than Natlan's Archon quest. So it's funny that we just got 2 very similar stories about having to sacrifice yourself to save your nation, pretty much. So basically, Hu Tao tries to sacrifice herself, but Zhongli pretty much encourages the traveler to go and save her because the traveler is a descendant and is immune to the limitations of the ley lines, so he's able to bypass the rules and pretty much save her. A quick note about the end of the quest is that while we contain the crisis, we don't exactly know why it happened as Ningguang and Beidou try to investigate. But we do know that it's very similar to what's been happening in Natlan with its ley lines and the Abyss. And if we look back to the Archon War, the 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, Keqing had told us that, hey, Tao Dou had gone awry because of the Archon War, because he was dragged into the war. So we can surmise that what happened today was likely due to some foreshadowing with an upcoming war that not only affects Natlan and Liyue, but the greater of Teyvat. So anyways, yeah, the plot was fine. Of course, Hu Tao was never going to die, and even though that does decrease some of the tension in the story, I was just like, you know what, let's just enjoy the story. Let's just go along with the ride, and it was a good ride. So yeah, next I want to talk about the character interactions, and I really like how they fleshed out Hu Tao's personality more. The whole just being silly and joking around about wanting to bury you because it's good for her business. And then adding the layer of complexity with how she feels about her parents, how that affects her line of work, I think just very interesting overall. If you told me that this Lantern Rite event was basically a love story for Hu Tao's character that the writers made, I would not disagree with you. So we also got introduced to Lan Yan both as a new playable character in this patch, as well as into the story. And what I really like about Lan Yan in particular is that, okay, sure, she didn't have like a big part in this quest per se, but you know, she did craft some dolls and weave together some dolls that we do use to go through the plot. But what I really enjoy about Lan Yan's character, just like overall, is that her kit is really fun. I like using her kit a lot, and so meeting her in the story was very interesting and different because not only is she a new character to us for the first time, she's also a new character to our playable characters for the first time. She has not met any of our playable characters. She doesn't know who Traveler is. I mean, she does know. She's heard of us, but she's never actually interacted with us. So it's cool seeing all these interactions between her and the other cast because it's literally them talking to each other for the first time, which is very refreshing, and hey, it embraces the whole new year, new friends perspective. At least for me, I haven't yet explored Chunyu Vale because I just haven't had like enough time to dedicate to it, because I really want to dedicate to it because Liyue is my favorite region. So it just feels weird because whenever we teleport to Chunyu Vale, I'm like, oh shoot, I haven't explored this place yet. My bad. But again, overall, the character interactions makes everyone in Liyue just feel more and more like a family, which is really cool. Like, Liyue is definitely the one that has the most interactions out of all of the nations, of course with Hoyoverse being a Chinese company. But it's just nice. It's just good vibes to me. I think my favorite interaction in this quest was between Hu Tao and Zhongli, where Hu Tao is pretty much getting ready to sacrifice herself, and she sings a poem before she goes, and the poem contains all but one of her constellations. It talks about the first 5 of her constellations, and Zhongli is the one that finishes the poem by citing the 6th constellation of Hu Tao, which is the Butterfly's Embrace, which is very thematic to the story because Hu Tao's constellation 6, it is one where she gets saved from a lethal strike, which again is very thematic because that's literally what happens to her at the end of the quest. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Just wanted to share my thoughts on Lantern Rite as a whole. It's the event of Genshin that I probably look forward to the most every year, and this year was still very fun. So I'm looking forward to next year as well. Happy New Year! Happy New Year, Happy Lunar New Year. Reach your goals, chase your dreams, finish your goals, make new ones. Just good vibes all around, so keep moving forward. And I'm gonna end this video with a quote from Lan Yan, so take it away, Lan Yan!
希望来年大家也万事顺遂，幸福安康。
That's a good one to end on.